Hey, Christian and Christyl, thank you for coming in. You just are marvelous backgrounds. You do wonderful things. You have incredible histories of accomplishment, and you're driving so many just amazing initiatives. So, really appreciate you sharing your deep insights and wisdom and so much more with our audience.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
So, I'm going to start with you, Christian, and then we'll go to Christyl. And the first question is, what are the three inflection points in your life that made you who you are today? And when you could have been 3 or 5 years old, it could have been inside, outside the family. It could have been, um, something in the job. Think sort of out of the box. And it could have been challenges, and together with opportunities.
That's a really good question. Um, First thing I would probably say was teaching myself how to code when I was about 8 years old. That just opened up the world to me. Discovering how tech was really kind of like my art form and ability to create impact in the world. Um, and everything since then has led to what I'm doing now. But um, gosh, the second inflection point. Um, a lot of challenges at home. Um, I went through a lot of mental health challenges, suicide attempts, everything, as a result of me coming out as gay, which was not accepted within some of the family. Um, and that you know, taught me a lot. Everything is great now, but um, uh, that was certainly a highlight. Um, I'd say the third inflection point was moving to DC. I moved to DC uh, about almost a year and a half ago. Have made lots of friends and getting in the more involved in the networks that I have, being right in the center of things, um, has been uh, has been transformative.
So that's really, really interesting. I can see now the kind of the tech basis. You started coding when you were very young. And then, of course, as you mentioned, you being engaged, created some challenges as well, and non-acceptance. And then, of course, and then mental health that affected your mental health. And then moving to DC, and I guess the relationships that are there and the opportunities and things like that, right? And I would say another inflection point is Christyl entering your life, right? She's
Absolutely.
an amazing,
That's part of
amazing
the
person.
DC. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay, Christyl, your inflection points.
So I have very distinct ones, I believe. So when I was probably in the third grade, our teacher asked us, what do we want to be when we grow up? And I wasn't sure. She said, everybody think about it when you go home and come back tomorrow and tell us exactly who you want to be, what you want to do when you grow up. And so when I went home, we were sitting at the dinner table and we were watching the news, and I saw a program about the Apollo landing. And they were talking about the astronauts landing on the moon and how exciting it was. And you see all the people cheering and everything. And I said, I know what it is I want to do. I think I want to be an astronaut. I was telling my parents that. And my dad said, you can do whatever you put your mind to. And he said, if it's to be, it's up to me. So he said, you are the only person that's going to be able to see you through on that. And so it was something that he said. He's like, there'll be challenges getting there. He said, but in every single cloud, there's a silver lining. You just have to look for it. So that whole conversation that night really kind of opened my mind to, yeah, if I really want to be an astronaut, I can be an astronaut. And I did go along that pathway until I figured out that's not what I want to be in confined spaces like that. But the second thing was when I was working at NASA, I was a woman in a very, very male dominated field, and there were no other women that looked like me. And so in that kind of arena, I was, like, oh, I'm so excited to be here. I had a whole lot of imposter syndrome. And so there, just kind of feeling like I'm lucky to be here. I'd be in a meeting asking because I was an engineer, just like the rest of the engineers there. I'd ask a question when we're in a meeting, And the gentleman would not look at me when answering my question. He would look at the other males in the room when answering my question. And so, I just kind of, let things like that roll off my back, not even, taking it seriously until one day. And I would always walk into a meeting and I would sit along the wall, not sit at the table, because I felt like they know so much more than I do. I'm still new at this, early in the career. And I would sit along the wall. But then one day I had a technician who worked for me come into my office, and we're sitting there talking, and he's like, "Man, I just had to pull, I'll just call her name Anna. I had to just pull Anna from the ceiling. She was very upset that you got the job as our deputy branch head of the electro-optics and controls branch. She was really angry." And I was like, "Why?" She said, "The only reason you got that job is because you're Black." And I was like, "Huh, okay." And, typically I'd let that roll off my back like water off a duck's back. But that particular day, for some reason, I just couldn't let it go in my mind. And I said to myself, okay, so it's not because I established the first chromium lysaf laser to achieve 33 millijoules and was invited on the global stage to present it in front of a global community who all applauded for that. It's not because I established the first piezoelectric coefficient measurement capability in this country and had people coming over and measuring their crystals in my laboratory. It's not because, and I kept going on about the accomplishments and achievements I've had while at NASA. And I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I deserve to be here first and foremost. And I will never again walk into a room and sit along the wall. I will take my rightful seat at that table. So from that moment on, my view of myself and the value that I bring to the table totally changed. And so did the trajectory of my career after that. So that was another inflection point. The third, I guess the two are close in hand. One of them is this gentleman here, Christian Elam, who's really opened me up to a totally different world, going from the technical side to the financial. And it's also about viewing yourself in a different world and a different role in the current world. And so when I got a chance to go over to the White House, I went to work under George Bush, and being able to see things through his lens as he's trying to make decisions, it's a very, very, very difficult thing to do. Watching all that he did and then being there during the transition to Obama, and then having Obama ask me to stay for another year to transition the National Science and Technology Council, that was very, very eye-opening. And I realized in the political world, no matter what decision you make, you are going to really anger millions of people. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're doing something amazing or something horrible, you're always going to upset millions of people. And so learning from them and hearing Obama talk about the fact that what you have to do is do as much as you can to mitigate, the naysayers or the negative pieces of it, help people to understand why it is you're doing what you're doing as much as you can. And then after you've done the best work that you can do to mitigate the difficulty coming on the backlash on the backside of it, then you just have to do what you believe is absolutely right for the country. And Bush was the exact same way. He was an amazing, amazing person. And so that really opened my eyes to the way politics work, and not to be so, it's never black and white. There's a ton of gray that you have to be willing to play in.
Wow, that's really, really fascinating. I mean, very early, you have this fascination with space, and
Yeah.
you proclaim, I'm going to be an astronaut because you're watching the Apollo program, and your dad talks to you and says, this is making you aware of self-agency. You can determine your future. It's
Yes.
unbounded.
Yes.
And be prepared for any challenges and things like that, hard work, but anything, just really no barrier. You
Right.
can drive that to whatever direction you go into, and then you work really hard, and with all your supreme talent, you're able to carve a great sort of career, right? And you get into NASA, but you realize confined spaces is not your thing.
Right.
so,
Right.
so you want to so you do the research side and things like that, and
Right.
but you look around and you think, wow, there aren't other people kind of look like me or things like that. So you maybe you feel out of place initially, and as a result, like you say, you don't take your position at the head of the table, or because that's where you are. You're an amazing, globally talented person,
Hmm.
and then you get to this realization. You know what? Maybe going back to what your dad said, though, self-agency, right? You have to seize it, and
Yeah.
you did, and it's because you have this colleague who was angry, right? And it's
Yeah.
for the wrong reason.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So you met that challenge, more than met that challenge, and you continue to prosper in your career, and you end up in DC, and you learn so much because, as you mentioned, it's not a black, white, yellow, green. It's all these kind of different shades of understanding, and you can never get 100%. Right?
Yeah.
You're just trying to working on the probabilities of, if you have to move some kind of policy forward, just
Yeah.
working on the probabilities that at least you can get most of the people thinking that this is a good thing, and so that's a great education.
Yeah.
And continue through two administrations, which is a great education as well.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's an incredible career. And then of course you meet Christian, and you get into finance and venture, and it's a different kind of thinking, right?
Yes.
But it really speaks to agency too, as well, right? There are no boundaries
Right.
in venture. It's really as far as your imagination can go, and you work on probabilities as well.
Yeah.
So this is, when you're partners in a venture, a funding venture, and things like that, right? Which you have, then it's like a marriage as well. So you two working together as partners, you definitely be learning a lot, and then of course the sum of the two is bigger, right? It's like 1 + 1 + 1 is not three, it's
Right.
111, but it's up. But in your case, it's exponential because there's so much talent coming to the table. So just a fascinating journey, and I can feel joy from
Good.
sort of this optimism and joy, and that everything is possible. So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that with me. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to reverse the order this time, because I started with Christian and went to Christyl. Now, with Christyl, if you can maybe just get into a little quick sort of story arc so people get to understand. I mean, you're in middle school, and you're interested in science and math and things like that, or and maybe you're interested in poetry and other things, and then you go to university and the things that you studied, and then like, what were the key elements that allowed you to make these big breakthroughs in science that you had, and then that experience of applying to NASA, and then it's a world famous entity in the world, and then the different kind of career progressions within NASA, so we can get to where you are today, and then I'll ask the same thing of Christian.
Yeah. So in middle school, I was not someone who just loved math and science. That just was not me. My parents were educators, they were teachers. And so some kids would be out playing and I would have to do math problems first before my dad would let me go out, and go to the pool. But I grew up in Virginia Beach, so I was a beach girl. We had a pool in our neighborhood, and so we had a clique of all of us that just kind of hung out at the pool all the time. And so that's kind of what I enjoyed doing. I did that. It was easy for me to do it, but it was not a love of mine. So just to be honest with you about that, that was not what I wanted to do. I looked at the astronaut because it just seemed like a really cool thing to do, to go into space and to float around. But as a third grader, you're not thinking about all the physics that goes into, getting an education to become, that kind of thing. So that's not what I was dreaming about. But then as I progressed and got, into high school, junior high school and high school, I was more an athlete. And so I was a gymnast. I was third in the Eastern region on bars and vault. I was an all-round competitor, and so I competed on all four events. I was also a track runner. So I was doing the sprints 100 meter, the 440 relay, 220, and also long jump. So I was an athlete all the way around, and that's what I really enjoyed doing as well. And then when it came time for me to apply for college, I found out that there was this scholarship called the Laser Program, which is Lincoln Aerospace Engineering Recruitment Program. And that was out of Lincoln University. And so I heard about this scholarship program kind of last minute, found out through one of my mother's sorority sisters. And so I applied to the program because it was a full ride for you to be able to go to Lincoln University in this program. And it was really focused on getting a degree in physics. And I was like, I don't know about that. But then at the same time, I was like, okay, I can go to this school, I can start in this field, and maybe I want to major in computer science or something like that, computer engineering. And so once I got there, the program was a very, very focused program. You leave, like I left right before getting out of high school. And so before leaving high school, I was there at 17 years old in college. That first summer, we were in a boot camp. We were all confined to one dormitory, and it was a house dormitory, like 3 floors. And we had dorm parents that were there. It was truly not allowed to talk to anybody on campus, lights out at certain time, up in the morning at a certain time. We all had to go to our classes together. We had lunch together. After, we finished our classes for the day, we would go to dinner together, and then we'd go to the math lab, which is, studying and doing your homework from this time to this time. 9 o'clock, you're back in the dorm, 10 o'clock, lights out. And they would go around to check to make sure everybody had lights out in their rooms, and you're in your own rooms at that time. And so it was very strict that first summer. And that was because we were to get a degree in physics in just 3 years, which is a really difficult thing to do. And that's what I did. And so with that, the reason that I started doing my first internship at NASA. And so they assigned me to a physics lab. And I was really bummed about that because I was a lifeguard in Virginia Beach and just wanting to hang out with my friends doing cool things for the summer. But I get to NASA and they're like, okay, this is going to be your lab, your assignment here. We walk up to the door, danger, laser hazard inside. And I was like, oh my goodness, what am I getting myself into? And so the guy opens the door. We ring the doorbell. He opens the door and he hands me these goggles. He said, here, put these goggles on. Do not lean down to the level of the table because there's stray laser lights going around the room. And if it pops you in your eye, it can blind you. And I was like, oh my God, please tell me I'm not going to be working in this lab. So we go inside, and this is back in the day where they had the big laser, the lab coats with the big sleeves, the white jackets. And he leaned over the table to adjust one of the mirrors of the laser, and his sleeve got caught. And I hear pop, 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 and smoke. And I was like, what in the world? And I was like, this is the job for me. You get to shoot lasers around the room. You get to put holes and stuff. I was a tomboy. I had one older brother, one younger brother, and really, really enjoyed that kind of thing. So that summer was the first summer that I learned about lasers and why this is such a cool field. You would be in the laser lab trying to figure, we were designing and building lasers out of whole new laser crystals. And so you try to make it work. And then everybody would jump in their cars and we'd go to the mall and we'd, eat ice cream and people watch until somebody had an idea. Then we'd jump back in the cars and we'd go back to the lab. Or one of my coworkers had a sailboat and we go out on the boat with our laptops, our bathing suits. You'd work for a while, then you'd get, stuck. You go in for a swim and you come out. Your mind is so open to so many different things. That's how we were able to innovate constantly. And NASA paid us to innovate, not to sit behind a desk for 8 hours. And so that is how they helped us to be creative, thinking way outside the box. And so from there, I said, I really want to stay a part of this NASA thing. This NASA organization is so cool. So I would keep coming back each summer after that. And then NASA picked me up to do my master's degree at Penn State University. And so I worked at NASA and Penn State as I was doing that, and then continued on until I got my job at NASA. They hired me afterwards. They were like, we've invested a lot in you and we want to make sure we keep you. And so it was a wonderful marriage between me and NASA. And I thoroughly enjoyed that.
You know, again, just reflecting on what you're saying, in middle school, because your parents are educators, so it's
Yeah.
like, Christyl, you got to finish this work first, this homework and things like that, the
Yes.
math and so on. And
Yes.
so you learn discipline,
Yes.
right?
I did.
And because you're a noted, gifted athlete, that takes discipline as well.
Discipline, a lot of discipline. Yes.
Right, and sacrifice. So, and then you go to college and you get a full ride. I mean, you find out that Lincoln University has this laser. In fact, it sounds like laser
I know. Yeah.
program. So kind of like a for warning or foreshadowing, I should say, of things to come. And you get a full ride, and it's a really disciplined program. I can hear
Yes.
that now. But that discipline program also had this opportunity to work summers at NASA, and you get introduced to these lasers that do amazing things. And you thought, that's for me, because it has a rigor to it,
Yes.
but maybe a sense of being on the edge as
Yeah.
well.
It does.
You have as an athlete, right? Because you're always pushing boundaries. You get a Bachelor of Science in physics, and you know, I'm going to continue doing this. So you get a Master of Science in electrical engineering from Penn State. And just for the folks out there who don't follow the engineering side, one of the most difficult areas of engineering is actually electrical engineering. I would say, you know, there's engineering physics and then electrical engineering. They're the two hardest ones because they have the most math in them. So they're very, very demanding, and almost like a degree in computer science, which has a lot of math in it. And then, well, you get a PhD in systems engineering, I think, from George Washington University, and you begin your career at Langley in the research center, the remote sensing technology branch. You're building laser system for advanced active remote sensors, kind of like this Star Wars kind of feeling to it. You become program manager and lead engineer for the dial pumped LISIF, CR LISIF technology development program. And then you serve as associate director for exploratory missions at NASA's Office of Earth Science. You get into programs and missions such as TOMS, GRACE, CloudSat, Triana, Aquarius, Hydros, OCL, and then you become then in the office of the chief engineer as deputy chief engineer for the program integration and operations, overseeing agency engineering, project management, and then you get into the White House as assistant associate administrator, or before the White House actually, helping oversee NASA's technical missions, and then you served in the White House roughly from 2008 onwards as executive director at the National Science and Technology Council, the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, between two administrations, which is tremendous, right? Because we know that it's often difficult to serve across two administrations, and yet you did it. And then at NASA, joined NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center as Deputy Center Director for Science and Technology, Goddard Senior Executive role, Deputy Director for Technology Research Investments, Planetary Science, Astrophysics, Heliophysics, Earth Science. And then you're overseeing a $3 billion annual budget, workforce of 10,000, 130 advanced technology initiatives, and you become the deputy director. Tremendous accomplishment. Featured in STEM and aerospace leadership forums, NILCM, X Prize, Women in Tech Profiles. You then Deputy Associate Administrator, NASA's Space Technology Mission Directorate, retire from NASA, and then you get into venture capital with as a general partner. And again, for the audience, GP is the highest rank within this sort of funding area. So you're a general partner, co-founder of Andromeda Ventures, Andromeda Ventures, and then focused on pre-seed Series A, investments in space, defense, energy, et cetera. So we'll get into that. And but just before, I just want to make sure we cover, sort of quickly before we get into Christian and then what you're doing at the Andromeda. You got the Presidential Rank Award, induction to the George Washington University's Engineering Hall of Fame, the Presidential National Medal of Technology and Innovation. Wow, that's like the highest ranking honor like in the world, right? Because the U.S. is number one in the world, and you get the Presidential National Medal of Technology and Innovation. It's quite an accomplishment. So that's astounding. That's remarkable. So,
I'm a smart
Christian,
partner.
yeah, we're the presence of greatness here, right? Like historical. I mean,
She's earned her seat as the head of the table, that's for sure.
yeah, I mean, she's part of history, right? Making not, in fact, a ranking member, a historical figure in history. Oh, just Christyl, before we move on to Christian, what do your parents and your family think?
Oh my goodness. My parents they both have passed away now, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
they were so incredibly proud of me and very, very, very supportive. I mean, they just were always very excited about everything that I told them. And we were very close. So I spoke to them every week, multiple times a week, actually. And so it just was a wonderful thing to have that kind of support network around. My brothers, my older brother, younger brother, we're all still very close. And so that's just, I mean, they are a very, very significant part of me being who I am today.
Yeah, and because your parents were educators, they would appreciate the effort required
Oh,
to
yeah.
do all the things you've done, right?
Yes.
And a realization of education, the
Mm,
promise of education, right? So,
yes. And that
okay.
my PhD, I was working on my PhD while I was working at the White House. So that's how late in my career I got the PhD. And both of my parents actually came to watch my defense, along with my son. My son wanted to be there to see me do this. And it's just amazing how I've been able to kind of drag him around the world with me to experience different cultures. But then to get him to see that kind of focus and that kind of determination, is something that has been ingrained in him as well. So that was a true pleasure.
So
And
did I get
Christyl ended
into
up giving the commencement address.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be able to give the commencement address at George Washington University. And it was the first time, it was in a big stadium. And the first time that, you know how when you're at those commencement speeches, people are talking, you could hear a pin drop in the stadium because I was telling them about the secrets that I've discovered and being able to, be around so many wealthy people, so many really famous people. And there were maybe four characteristics that were the same in all of them. And I said, I'm going to share that secret with you right now. And people were really, really quiet. But then it really got down to a lot of some personal things for them to think about. And so I got a standing ovation, including the professors behind me in the robes. And one of the professors said, to this day, we have never had a speaker that has been as well received as you were on that day.
and what were those four things?
You'll have to look at my video. No, so one of them is really understanding your relationship with, it was really mastering your relationship with fear. And that is false evidence appearing real. Because so many times, you'll have all of these people telling you can't do things. And I, it's been years ago since I gave the actual speech, but people have that little voice telling them, well, if you're going to start a business, you don't have enough money to do that, or you don't have the right people, or how are you going to handle this, or how are you going to handle that? And so many times in your mind, you have all of these things that make it so insurmountable that people just refuse to take that step because it makes them afraid. But really, if you're able to get that fear out of your head and onto paper, write down those things. What's the worst thing that can happen? Write down what you think those worst things are And then for each of them, address each one. If this were to happen, then I'll just do this. If this were to happen, I'll just do this. And so once you actually see it on paper, it's not such a big, scary deal. It really is something that you can handle and you can wrap your mind around if you don't leave it up here causing all kinds of trouble. And so, I talked about the whole fear thing, and those people that are successful really understand what that is, and they've mastered their relationship with fear. And so then there are several other things that, three other things that I mentioned. I can't remember what they were at this time, but I can go back to my notes, to my speech.
So that's just a fascinating journey, and Christian, thank you for interjecting and putting that out. Sort of hallmark of Christyl and amazing contributions. So what really a tremendous partner. Okay, now Christian, if you can walk your sort of career progression as well.
Sure. So
from middle school.
Okay, from middle school. It's really where it all started.
Yeah.
I was born and raised in San Francisco in the Bay Area. To very interesting family. My family's in real estate and construction. But both my parents are also big in fitness. My dad was Mr. America, and my mom was also a pro bodybuilder and personal trainer for some of them. My sister's a pro wrestler. And so growing up with that mindset, I mean, being a bodybuilder is perfection. You are a perfectionist. They looked at it as art. You are sculpting your own body. And so growing up, they were very strict about my diet and everything. Had to have 1.1 grams of protein per pound body weight every 3 hours. I would train with them and you name it. But it was kind of interesting because somewhat similar to Christyl, starting in 5th grade, at our 5th grade graduation, we are given a note card, and we had to put on it what we wanted to be when we grew up. And everyone just put maybe like one thing. I want to be a fireman, I want to be a policeman, I want to be an astronaut. I filled the entire note card. I want to be an author, I want to be an astronaut, I want to be a scientist, I want to be an investor. I filled the entire thing. And everyone was laughing at me at that time. And I've accomplished a decent amount of that so far. But I've always had an thanks to my family, an entrepreneurial background. I started with had a large garden growing up, so I would sell all our produce. My dad invested and got me 5 beehives that I then sold all the honey for and everything. I'm about 5 years old. They also brought me into our family meetings to talk about investing and wealth management and all of that, starting when I was probably about 6 years old. As I mentioned, taught myself how to code when I was about 8 years old. Ended up being nominated to be one of the youngest to go to Stanford for this computer science program when I was 10 years old. Was not a degree program, but I was taking some of the classes, and everyone else was 18, 20 years old, and I had my own dorm on campus, no parents or anything, which was just a remarkable experience. As I mentioned, them being strict on food, I, being there, had an unlimited meal card and no parents. And so my first day, I splurged and had a lot of, went to the pasta bar, went to the frozen yogurt station, and got a little overserved on that. And the first night ended up throwing up in the middle of the night, forgot my key card in my dorm and locked myself out. So I had to sleep in front of my dorm, and everyone thought I got hazed or something. But being at Stanford at that age, and everyone else was kind of like my older sibling, walking me to class, helping me find my way when I was lost. got private tours at Apple and Google and Facebook and Adobe and all of that. This was like in 2012, 2013, when, tech is already established, but it was really kind of in that scaling phase. And seeing it was just magical. Ended up being chosen to lead the robotics team. At Stanford, we were given 3 days to help create a robot that would change the world in some way. And I had a big fascination with blind people at the time. I was taking the ferry to go to the San Francisco Giants game about a week before with my dad. And the guy sitting in front of us was blind. And I was asking him a million questions. How do you count your money? How do you know that people aren't, scamming you? And, all different kinds of things. And my dad was probably embarrassed of, me asking, a million questions. But so I was very interested in that and decided to create a robot that would help categorize and sort things for people that were visually impaired. And we did it and won third place in the national competition for it. It was a bit scary because all our code got deleted like the night before, and we had to redo the whole thing. It was interesting, but yeah, started launched a few apps on the App Store. One of them reached the top charts within 8 hours of launching, very unexpectedly. I just made that for myself and my family. It was in the emergency services space overseas, stemming from anxiety. My dad was having a lot of health issues. We were traveling down the Danube in like 7 different countries within like a 2-week period. And I was just thinking, what would happen if he had a heart attack right now? Who would I call? Realized 911 is only for the US and Canada. In each country has their own emergency service number. And this is, Apple's emergency SOS feature wasn't really working at the time. It just kind of worked based off your home address on your iCloud account at the time. And so created an algorithm that would, find your local emergency service number for wherever you were in the world. Because some like counties and villages and things had different numbers in the overall country and other areas. And it would share your geo coordinates with the dispatcher so they know, when you don't speak that language, kind of where you were, roughly where in the building you are, different things. And started working for a few different startups, built a couple myself, and then decided to get on the investing side. Being a founder was hard for me just because I have so many interest areas that focusing on just solving one problem just wasn't really that interesting. And so started managing some of my family's capital. I ended up going to Berkeley to host their business school, doing this program called Kobe that was kind of similar to their MBA program. 3-year program, ended up rushing it into 9 months because it was during COVID. And I did not see daylight for quite some time, fully focusing on that. Just kind of wanted to bang it out, but was managing some of my family's capital in the public markets, which was great financially, but was really not mentally stimulating for me, and just lacked, purpose and impact. It's just trading. It's just making money. And as I mentioned, some of the mental health challenges that I went through, I just realized, my life, it needs to be much more than just money. And so, and really kind of empathizing with other people who are going through similar things and who feel depressed and suicidal. I co-authored the Kids Online Safety Act, passed in the Senate 91-3, about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And with that, it was really kind of realizing how dramatic the suicide rates were increasing, especially amongst children starting at ages 5 years old, and diving into the real reason behind that. Yes, social media, yes, COVID, etc. But the real reason is because the means had changed. before kids were overdosing is only like 2% effective. You have to go to your parents' room. You can't open the thing. Maybe your parents don't have it. You throw it up. It doesn't work. All kinds of different things. And now kids are going on YouTube and typing in painless ways to die, and it feeds them all the YouTube videos on how to tie noose and hang themselves, which is the most popular way of committing suicide and the most effective. And it's an instant access to the means. And so, realizing that, we met with some of the folks at YouTube and Google, and their responses to it uh, were not satisfactory. um, Trying to put it kindly. And realize that it's really kind of a policy issue. Section 230 that defines whether or not you're a free speech platform or a publisher. And so, it was like, okay, well, we need to change the policy to, more so allow these platforms to kind of remove this kind of content. And so that's what we got involved in the bill. Senator Blackburn and Senator Blumenthal were the two co-sponsors of it. So it's completely bipartisan. And what's unique about it is it marks it as the first time in U.S. history of formally building in youth representation into a federal policy, which is the section that me and my partner wrote. And so, because I was kind of joking with the senators, and I was like, please tell me you like 70-year-old senators are not writing tech policy for kids' mental health without talking to kids about how to do that. Like, one, you need to get their buy-in, because kids are going to see it as, these old senators taking away their social media and whatever. And that's not. Yeah, so I was saying that really kind of led me down the policy world. And started a previous fund that was investing in deep tech and defense. That's just really where my interest area is. I'm like, if you're not changing the world, then what are you doing? You're kind of wasting time. And B2B SaaS was not really that interesting to me. There's lots of opportunity, lots of money to be made. Got it. Not for me. And out of the last fund, we incubated a company using lasers to shoot drones, counter drone company. We started doing that because the CEO and co-founder of it, who's a good friend, mentor, and partner of mine, Gleb Chuvpio, he was visiting Poland kind of at the start of the Ukraine conflict. And one of his best friends since elementary school died from a drone attack as a civilian, just like walking to the grocery store. And so all their friends and folks in Ukraine and Poland were asking him, hey, do you, he's a VC. Are you looking at any companies that are, in the counter drone space doing this? And so we were looking for solutions for them, and ended up not finding what that would be a true solution. There's just kinetic solutions or high powered microwave and different things, but nothing quite as precise. So we decided to start it ourselves and recruited the former Secretary of the Navy as a full-time co-founder in the company, and some other, really amazing people. And so that I was very focused on helping them expand the team, getting the funding, and business development. And yeah, and then now Christyl and I are starting our own fund.
So, Christian, you talked about it very early on. Your parents are into fitness and diet and things like that, and as you mentioned, even counting like the grams of protein. And that was the environment. So there's a lot of discipline in that as well.
Definitely. And it was really instilled in me by my mom, kind of similar to Christyl, as you can accomplish anything.
Right.
You put your mind to it, and you have a conviction in what you're doing. Just do it. What do you have to lose? And so, doing everything I've done, I've taken a lot of risk. But but there's no better time for me to do it, you know. And also, I know what I'm capable of. I know the network that I have, and everything to make it happen.
And you know, sort of top ranked as well in the fitness area, your parents, right? And that passed down to you, the discipline, but anything is possible, sort of unbounded as long as you do the discipline and the work. You have a early curiosity in programming. You're taught yourself programming. You get into this program at Stanford at the age of 10, and you're mentored by some of the others. Though you're really mentoring them, but you know, because you're younger. So, but at least, but they'll take care of you. They feel this. They'll help you or take care of you in a sense because you're very young in a, you know, in an atmosphere of much older people, and you show a lot of talent, this amazing capability to create, including creating applications. And you were creating applications that fit, you know, the things that were happening with your parents, as well as you mentioned, in the Apple Store and things like that. And this is while you're in your teens. I'm just reflecting. Do you know Lucy Guo by any chance? Because she's the co-founder of Scale AI, and now she's got something called Passes. And
I don't know her personally, but I know of her. Yes.
yeah, so you know, it's similar in the sense that she was taught herself programming and then
Okay.
creating applications that have commercial viability as well,
Yeah.
and solving problems, right? And in a normal way. You also indicated that you were managing capital at a very early age. And so your family was able to accumulate then, I guess, some capital that allowed you, but they also had the trust of having you manage the capital as well, right?
Yeah, they put training wheels at first, but yes.
And then you get into this certificate of business excellence, so Kobe program at Berkeley. It's an executive education program, and you compressed it because of COVID. And I believe you got some Cornell training
Yeah.
as well. As you mentioned, you're self-taught, top of the charts in terms of at age 14 in the Apple Store. You're working as a senior iOS engineer. You start doing things like Runway X, and I think it's what back Manatee Capital.
Yeah.
And you also talk about uh, being introduced to some of the challenges and drones and things like that, and then realizing that there isn't an existing venture, so you create your own. And again, this sort of a self-agency that is really important. This ability to say, you know what, there's a problem, I can't see a solution, so I'm going to do it. And so you have this background in investments, and you mentioned earlier, you know, like, or I mentioned earlier myself here too, you know, you're 2014, so you're like in your early 20s, right?
I turned 24 in 2 days.
Well, happy birthday,
Thank
24.
you.
And you did this COSA, Kids Online Safety Act, right? I mean, it's just remarkable working to pass a bill, the first of its kind, leading in this way. You've got this peace ambassador, United Nations
Yeah.
aspect we're
Right
around
about that
you.
one.
Yeah, UNESCO, UNESCO collaboration, different things there. Sometimes you refer to as what's this HE ambassador, Christian Elam as well, right? Used in diplomacy, you know, participating in Polygraph Inc., right? And Thor Dynamics and Seed Rounds and so on. And then speaking at the World Summit and other venues because of this tremendous amount of contribution you've made at such an early age. And in 2 days, you're going to be 24. I'm like
Yeah.
3 times your age. So Christian, that's quite remarkable. And Christyl, earlier I was commenting, in terms of your parents, because you were very youthful.
Mhm.
So, and then I was, extend my sorrow, my parents to your parents. I had no idea that they had already passed because you were so youthful. Right?
Yeah.
So but you have that youth and wisdom and energy that combined with Christian, and he's 23 currently. I mean, it's just an amazing amount of optimism and capability at the table. Now we're caught up, right? We're now to Andromeda Ventures. Okay. What led you to found Andromeda Ventures with Christyl? How to talk about that formation process and the investment thesis and things like that?
Yeah, so in Christyl's most recent role at NASA as the deputy and associate administrator of the Space Technology Mission Directorate, um, it was her responsibility to map out the technologies that we need for the Artemis program for humans to live sustainably on the moon by 2040. And not just, get by, but really be able to thrive there. And so while she was there, her and her team identified 187 technology shortfalls, tech that we need that we don't have as 60 countries for this mission, the 60 countries who signed the Artemis Accords. And so, as her and I began collaborating more closely, not officially, but I was like, there's a huge opportunity with you have these clearly defined needs, plus, at the time about 5,000 engineers accepted the deferred resignation package under Trump. So I was like, what are all those people going to be doing now? Like, transitioning to private sector, into startups and the big primes and all of that. And Christyl knows a fair amount of them, or they have worked for her, and she knows which ones might be good founders or good employees or whomever it might be. And so I was like, there's a huge opportunity right now where some of those folks might start companies, and we can be at the edge of that and as they're starting it. But with these 187 shortfalls, this is a very different approach than other deep tech investors that are looking at a technology and seeing where it can go. And this time we are starting from the other side and looking back to what we need for that. And so, it's much more surgical kind of approach. And so we started this fund. We're raising 200 million for the fund, investing from pre-seed to Series B. Across aerospace, robotics, infrastructure, energy, defense, and health. All the things that we need for that mission, but it must apply here on Earth as well. This isn't like a space solely fund. It's all the technologies that we need for space and for the moon, but it'll work here on Earth. So it's dual use in the sense of like lunar and terrestrial, as well as government and commercial. And so we will have exited the companies by the time that they are used on the moon, if it's in 2040. Anyway, that's a little bit about the approach. And then we brought in Christyl's former boss from NASA to join us full time as an operating partner. We brought in Dan Feta, who was the U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense to Europe and NATO, and he was the VP of Government at Lockheed for 7 years and the White House liaison for Lockheed. We brought in the former Chief AI Officer at NASA as an advisor, Rasmus Monk, who's the #1 chef in the world out of Copenhagen, to come in and help define what food looks like in space, how do you grow it, and all different things. Astronaut Jeanette Epps, who spent 8 months on the ISS last year, and former background in CIA as well. And then some other leaders across DoD and energy, the intelligence community, who have just come out of their positions. So the point is not a general from 20 years ago where a lot has changed. Our whole, team are folks that have just either created or ran these programs at the highest levels in government. Now we're investing based off of that.
I mean, the Rolodex must be incredible. I mean, Christian, because you did all of this policy work, foundational pioneering policy work. So, and then Christyl, because of the tremendous leadership for such an amazing career you've had in the science sector, and all the awards you won as well. So, all the validation to say, it's top tier between the two of you. Like, you've got a top ranked global team. I mean, that's incredible. And
We have a lot of
also,
fun.
yeah, I can see you could have, yeah, for sure. And the fact that you know where the gaps are, and then you can address the gaps. And because your networks are so big, you'll be to find the solutions for those gaps. And it's this idea of you're going to do good for the world, plus you'll have great returns as well.
Absolutely.
So that's a remarkable thesis, and really an amazing team that you two have put together, and exciting. So can you talk about some of the areas that are the gaps in a little bit more detail that you want to address?
Yeah, so you think about the fact that right now there are so many companies out there. You've got Elon Musk, who, of course, NASA has invested, billions of dollars into over all of the years, helping him to get where he is today through contracts, et cetera. And then there are several other companies right now that can launch us to space. But what happens once you get there? Who's investing in the infrastructure? How are you going to survive the lunar night? So, energy is one of the first and most important things that we've got to solve. Once you get there, it's not going to just be solar power because there are going to be, weeks with no sunlight whatsoever. So solar would fail. So you're going to have to make some investments in nuclear and other capability. It's not just nuclear sources, but also energy distribution. How do you get power from one part of the moon to another part of the moon? And this is not just for the moon. This is extensible to Mars because Mars is our ultimate destination. That is the one planet that used to be very much like Earth. Many people don't know that Mars used to be an Earth-like planet that had an environment. It had oceans and running rivers and things like active volcanoes and all of that. But something drastic happened there that changed it from this Earth-like planet into this red, dry, barren desert of a planet. So all of the things that we are doing, once Earth, right now, we want to stay here on Earth as long as she will host us, as long as she will host us. But we've already had one near existential event that's happened here on Earth. There were dinosaurs in the air, on the land, undersea. All of them were wiped out in one fell swoop. With that being the case, we know that those types of things happened in stages on Mars. And so when we see indications, and that's why we have the Mars rovers on the surface now, excavating the regolith, so that we can understand what happened and over time how these things occurred. So when we start to see those indications of something happening here, we'll know we have X amount of time to get humans off of this planet. And there is some place to go so that the human race can survive. And so that is a long-term strategy. It's not like people just want to go explore, but we have to have some kind of plan B. In the meantime, there's a lot that can be done on the moon that is financially viable as well, minerals and so forth and so on. And so with that being the case, energy is one. Then you've got to think about clean drinking water. That's going to be absolutely important for us to be able to do. Right now, we've got so many filtration systems here on Earth that, that operate fine in a gravity environment. But when you get to zero gravity, everything functions differently. Liquids flow differently. So you can't have machines that have oil in them because that works very differently with no gravity than it does here on Earth. And also, when you're not on Earth, you're going to have to be protected from the solar flares that come from the sun, those coronal mass ejections that happen. If those rays come down, you've got gamma rays and all kinds of radiation, humans can't survive that. It's just like going to an X-ray times 1,000. it would really fry us. So whatever we build on the surface of the moon has to be radioactive, radio protected from the radiation. A small layer of water over that habitat would do it. So you're talking about water to live, water to cover the housing, water for data and for the AI and the data centers and all of those things that we're going to need. It's going to be a ton of it. So we have to think about development of water, purification of water, all of those things on a much bigger scale in a zero G environment. You got to think about entertainment, mental health, because going from Earth to Mars is a 9-month journey, 9 months in one vehicle with no sunlight, no day and night cycles, which means your circadian rhythm will go crazy unless we can figure out how to maybe go from your sleeping quarters into a holodeck of sorts where you can not just be looking using goggles and looking at a flat screen, but walk into a very immersive environment where you can trick the body into believing that you're basking in the sun, including getting the vitamin D and every other thing that your body knows you're going to get if you're actually basking in the sun. And so habitats, 3D printing of materials, using new materials to be able to get to some creative habitat creation there. Robotics have to be taken to the next level. I don't know if you saw the movie Avatar 2, where they had the robots doing 24 hours a day manufacturing of the city. In Avatar, it's going to be very much like that too. If we really want to be able to establish a city there, you're going to need for the robots to be able to do quite a bit more than they can. And that's AI driven. You got AI driven energy, supply, so that you know when to maintain something versus running it to failure. There's so many areas that have to be invested in order for us to succeed there.
That's really, really fascinating. So I can actually see the convergence of things like high performance computing and
Yes.
because you need data centers and space is a great environment for that. You have chip technologies, the normal kind of chip technologies, space is the future. You have advanced networks, different kinds of networks that can work on a planetary scale. Been Surface done some work in that area,
Yes.
but you can build on that work. I'm just kind of free
Yes.
wheeling off of what you're saying. Quantum computing, of course, and the capabilities unbounded when you get into the space environment, especially
And
because
quantum sensors too.
yeah, and quantum set, right. And in fact, you're a specialist in sensing.
Yeah.
And then advanced materials, and then comes the novel materials, programmable matter, as you mentioned again, AI, machine learning, and everything that's happening there. World foundation models, which are more physically based rather than LLMs as well. There's robotics and automation that you mentioned, and autonomy that is happening.
And
There's
biotechnology.
biomedical innovation and biotechnologies. There's energy and storage, new kinds of energy and storage, advanced manufacturing in space. And then there's a flywheel aspect of energy. So you look at a base layer of energy driving hardware, whatever that kind of hardware is.
Right.
Above that, you can have what I call fabric, sort of like the infrastructure, but this is now space-based together when mingling with Earth environments, so infrastructure. And then above that, you have intelligence, driving intelligence. And so you're going to have all sorts of different kinds of intelligence, the merging of people and machine intelligence, plant intelligence, perhaps, other kinds of intelligence. That leads to autonomy. And in other words, recursive, autonomous, automated systems and things like that. So autonomy, I can see all of those elements then converging in all of the work you're doing. So what are you going to do with the trillions of returns you're going to generate?
We're going to do even more. Take that and invest into more, because there's so much that has to be done, and there's so many holes. There's so many gaps. And if you really want to improve the quality of life here on Earth, it is going to take thinking outside of the box. And right now, so much of what we do is focused on the next iteration of this and the next iteration of that and the next iteration of that. But the one thing that NASA kind of really instilled in me is it's not necessarily about taking what you've got and just doing an incremental step. It's
Right.
about really being able to step outside of that whole thing, look at it from a different vantage point completely, and then go from here to here, not just from here to here and here to here and here to here.
Right, the 10x kind of paradigm, right? The
Yes.
aspect of not looking at existing systems and existing tooling, but looking something much bigger and then figuring out what tooling and operating and processes and tech you
There
need to
you
get to
go.
that endpoint. And that's the DNA of many companies out
Mhm.
there within Microsoft,
Uh-huh.
but also within Google.
Uh-huh.
And of course, Elon. Elon is
Yeah,
constantly thinking of these,
absolutely.
and that's what you're enabling, and you're going to be the catalyst for that in a
Yes.
remarkable ways. And Christian, with your background of breaking just all sorts of it's a challenge at the age of 10 and 5, and there are no challenges, right? You see the challenges, you go for it, and you surmount it as an investor, as an innovator, as a creator. And then Christyl, you got this amazing background as well, doing the same thing, right? So wow. And so this is more than 1 + 1 + 1 is 3 and or 111. This is like 2 + 2 + 2 + 2 + 2, but multiplied together. So 8, so
Yeah.
and so the kind of this exponential capability, right? So that's really quite magical. It's like 32, a 2 to the 32nd power, and you get
Well,
one.
there you go.
And that's you have that sort of capability in quantum as well, right? With the parallelization aspect. So that's a great journey. Now, I'd love to insert this into my upcoming keynotes that I do to remarkable, a lot of them private. Now, Kristen, can you give me a 2 minute piece? I could play the videos, and I'm gonna or Christian. I'll start go back to Christian. A 2 minute piece, just that I can inject in all of my keynotes, and I'm gonna ask the same to Christyl, so I can balance between you two. One keynote I'll put Christian, but it's got to be. So keep in mind, I'm a futurist, and I get invited to speak to investment groups and sovereign funds and CEO groups and things like that. But it's got to be something they haven't heard of. So it's got to be oh my, oh, right. So I'm putting you on the spot, but I got to corral it in under, like, let's say 2 minutes.
Amen. And what is the goal of it?
Um, to the audience, where they go, gee, this Andromeda, amazing what they're doing, and then you got these fantastical, amazing things that you compress into 2 minutes. It's a big ask, but I thought I'd go for it. Hey, let's go for it.
Can you start with
And,
Christyl?
well, you actually talked about some of this already, right? You know,
Yeah, I would just say that Andromeda Andromeda Ventures is really, really focused on, I'll just say, we have a vision for what is going to be, what is happening. The humans will be living on the moon by 2040, period. And that is not a we hope so, because China and Russia are working very, very closely together, and they will make those achievements sooner, if possible, than 2040. And
yeah,
so
for
for
sure.
us, it is truly a matter of Andromeda is in such a sweet spot of knowing what is necessary in order for these 60 countries to achieve that goal and vision, because we've mapped out the roadmap. We know what it looks like. We know where the gaps are. We know what investments must be made, because I've been investing billions of dollars over the past 35 years
Yeah,
in
billions.
specific technology areas. And so I
Right.
know, what is necessary. I know what to invest in, and I know how to help those portfolio companies once we invest in them. So,
Right.
given that sweet spot, knowing what it is, Andromeda is uniquely positioned to now align private capital with those gap areas where we know there is a pull, not just for the space community, but for all of those tangential markets as well. The
Yeah.
best way for you to get a return on that investment is for you to have more than one customer. more than one market that has a need for your product. And for us, those things that we've identified will help us push the technology right here on planet Earth to improve the quality of life here on Earth, as well as align us for success living off planet. And so that is what the sweet spot of Andromeda is.
Yeah, and then both of you have this amazing networks and abilities and capabilities of converging all of the technology and the solutions and the human aspect to it together
Yeah.
into ultimate pinnacle solutions, right?
Yes.
In a way that's dramatic, like what Elon has done over the last a few decades. You will be able to do that multiplied by 100, right?
Right.
Some,
Because of it's really quite amazing. Okay, Christian, your turn.
I was just going to add to that. Something that we haven't haven't mentioned is 70% of the fund is focused on the US, 30% of it is global. So we can do the cross-pollination, given the relationships that we have abroad with various heads of state, the other country ambassadors, and everything to support their local ecosystem. We're all on this mission together, the 60 countries.
Mhm.
But I think Christyl said it perfectly. I don't have anything else to share.
And I know, Christian, you got to go in a few minutes, so I'm going to go to the closing here. And I'll start with you. If you can give your recommendations to the audience and questions you want to leave the audience.
Cool. Recommendations, I would say if they are investing in the space or wanting to focus much more on the technical diligence rather than the hype. I've seen numerous companies that have been backed by tier one VCs, that are investing in deep tech that the technology and the companies are flat out fraud, to the point where founders have reached out to me asking and flat out saying that they don't have this technology that they are claiming, and asking for my help, and helping them get to that point. I would also say, in a similar way, we've built this fund to be non-traditional. We are not your traditional venture or investment banking background, and that's very intentional. Bring in the real experts, not just as advisors, but actual partners, in what they're doing.
Just on reflection, then, do you have a venture studio kind of feel to you? So it's more than just investing; you're really partners of your.
Yeah, absolutely. We are very hands-on with the companies, and that's actually something that it's not forced by any means. It's something that the companies want, and in competitive deals, they are opening allocation and saving allocation for us, as well as giving us allocation at much preferred pricing compared to the current investors, because of the ways that we can support them and cutting their timelines down quite a bit and saving the company and the other investors a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a great vision and the ability to execute, of course, and a great relationships network and experts you can bring, almost like fractional experts you can bring into your companies because of the networks you
Exactly.
bring.
Yep.
And enabling, so.
Something I would encourage as well is, we're taking more of a lead and co-lead positions in these companies. We can follow on certainly, but given our ability to really help the companies, that's what we're doing. And I see lots of other investors that are well equipped, that don't have the conviction to be lead investors, and they always say that they're leaders in the space and and all of that, but a lot of them are really just follow-on capital, which is needed, but we need more people to step up.
Yeah, the lead part is difficult too, right? Because you really have to do really thorough due diligence.
Yeah, which we do.
So it's easier to follow because you think, oh, they've already done a lot of the homework, right?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
okay, Christyl, your closing recommend, and it doesn't have to be investment oriented. It could be about the world. It could be about
Oh,
NASA
wow.
and space. So there's no boundaries in terms of the recommendation and questions you want to leave the audience.
Wow. I would say, so I'll say two things. First of all, in terms of the investments, um, when it comes to you having any of you having conversations about space investment, remember that space doesn't necessarily just mean things that are going to space. It is technologies that enable space. So when a company is a gaming company, or their health tech devices, or their, materials, companies, they still are space companies. They are needed desperately in space. So when we say that we are investing in space, I don't want their minds to just go to somebody floating on the International Space Station, or somebody way out in Mars or something like that. It is really investing in those earthbound terrestrial technologies that will also enable space. So just point of clarification for any of you thinking about investing in space as it relates to Andromeda. There may be others with different theses, but ours is not that. The other thing that I will just say, which is what I always say, when it comes time for any of you out there who are building a company or who do have a dream that's not even necessarily associated with your work, it is whatever it is that you just think about that brings you life, that thing that is really, really joyful for you. If you want to pursue that thing, there is nothing that can stop you from achieving your goals except for you. Nothing can stop you except for you. And nobody else can map out what's possible for you to achieve except for you. And so you are the master of your fate. You are the one that needs to make it happen. And remember what my dad always said to me: if it is to be, it is up to me. Period.
That's very true, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's up to the individual. It's
Yeah.
this idea of internal locus of control rather than external
Yes.
locus of control, right?
Yeah.
So again, thank you to you both. Just a remarkable journey you took me on, and thank you for sharing so many of your great insights with our audience. So many great recommendations. You two are just doing amazing work and really great examples of servant leadership. You're serving the world and contributing to a better world in all so many different dimensions, almost like a matrix contribution of servant leadership. So thank you for sharing so much.
You're quite welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.